So if you come to this session, we are going to hear from Helen, who'll be about writing in memory and how difficult it is to write a memoir when you can't always trust your memory. Helen is the author of The Backstreets of Purgatory, which is a book set in Glasgow featuring character art of Caravaggio. Helen is an unbound author, so to be an unbound author means that you have spent a long time crowdfunding and bullying everybody you know to fund your novel, and it's a hard old grind, but it's a great publisher to be part of, and it's a great writing community, so it's nice that so many unbound authors are featured in this festival.
A bloke in skinny black trousers and a baggy t-shirt ushered us in. His hair hung in curls over his eyes. In a thin voice, he introduced himself as Ewan. He left us in a side room with beige vinyl chairs where we sat studying the cracked grey linoleum. A few moments later, he reappeared with Greek tea in a polystyrene cup. Toast? He asked. No thanks, Mark said. Your room will be ready soon, he promised. Mark held my hand as we waited in silence. I'm not staying here, I said eventually. Helen, we've been through this. I'm not staying. You have a choice, the social worker told me when she arrived on the ward. You can either stay here of your own free will, or we will section you. That's not a fucking choice, I said. I waited until she'd gone before I told the nurse in charge that I was leaving. You can't, she said. You can't fucking stop me, I said. Yes, I can. As she was happy to elucidate, under section 25 bracket 2 of the Mental Health Act bracket Scotland, she had the right to detain me for up to 2 hours until a doctor could see me to take it further, which she did. It was my first taste of what it meant to have my freedom taken from me. It was a sour taste of disbelief and rage, and it was a taste I would come to know well. When the room was ready, Mark was sent home. Ewan took me through to see it, hovering at the door while I looked around. There was a bed with a thin worn quilt, a bedside cabinet made of cheap wood laminate, and a small sink with a mirror above it. Behind a sliding door in the corner was a toilet. It had not been cleaned. I looked in the mirror and tried smiling. Red-rimmed eyes with black circles stared back at me. I sat on the edge of the bed, and the walls closed around me. 2 days later, I finally crawled out of my room and went to watch the TV in the sitting room. The room was almost full with patients who all seemed to know one another. I sat down on an empty chair. There was a collective gasp. Ah, you bitch, get off my pal, a lad said, his eyes flashing as he lunged for me. Ewan leapt from his armchair and pulled him off me. I found out later he was called Davy. Nutter, I mumbled. The others sniggered and went back to watching Bargain Hunt. I hauled myself up and dragged myself back to my room. I could hear Davy arguing over the empty seat. Ewan followed me and parked himself on the chair outside my room. I slammed the door shut and sat on the bed. He pushed the door open. You know the rules, he said gently. But that was the thing. I had no idea about the rules. At the ward round the following day, Dr. Lorimer asked me how I was. Fine, I said. He laughed. That's the thing about Helen, he said to Pretty as a registrar. She's always fine. Pretty suited her name with her sleek black hair and delicate features. In keeping with the latest fashion, she wore her stethoscope slung casually around her neck. Her brown woolen trousers were slightly too big for her, and the sleeves of her fine knit sweater were always tucked down over her hands. Her ingenuous appearance belied her forensic eye. I would never succeed in getting one past her. When can I go home? I asked. Oh, I don't think we're even considering that yet, Dr. Lorimer replied, his hair fluffed up in panic. Oh, for fuck's sake, I said. I'm perfectly fucking fine. I wasn't the one wearing an ill-fitting tweed jacket with elbow patches and diarrhea-coloured jumbo cords. I don't think so, Helen, he said. I met Ronnie, my first name nurse, at the ward round. He was supposed to be the one in overall care of me. In appearance, he resembled an overinflated school kid. Something his tight chinos and pale blue polo shirt, 2 sizes too small for him, did little to dispel. After the ward round was finished, he barged into my room with a crocodile smirk across his face. Your solicitor is coming tomorrow, he said in a weedy nasal voice. What solicitor? For your court case next week. What court case? He didn't bother to explain. We were supposed to have one-to-one sessions where I told him what I was feeling. It was meant to help, to give me some kind of release. Ronnie, I think you're a prick. I told him. I don't give a fuck what you think, he told me in reply. It turned out I was a good judge of character. Several months later, he got one of his patients pregnant, a pretty girl with auburn hair and scarred arms. Fucked her in the staff toilets, I was told. I hear they're still together. Within a few days of being on the ward, I lost what remained of my appetite. Mealtimes were a torment. All I ate was a soup the colour of insipid pond water with bloated lumps of barley floating in it. The other food was worse. Grey boiled potatoes served with chunks of gristle and slimy gravy. At the queue for the dinner one evening, Ewan asked me how I was doing. Don't ask them that, Sonny, said Les, another nursing assistant. He had a scar down his face and a booming Sergeant Major's voice. If you ask them that, they'll think you give a shit. The court hearing was the following week. The courthouse had a magnificent marble foyer that echoed with the footsteps of solicitors, but the courtroom was nothing more than a seminar room with several rows of plastic chairs and no windows. The sheriff listened to Dr. Lorimer's testimony. Do you have anything to add, Dr. Taylor? He asked. I shrugged my shoulders. The proceedings were a joke as far as I was concerned, and but for the chance of a day out, I would have refused all part of in the rigmarole. The sheriff made his ruling under Part 5, Section 18 of the Mental Health Act, Scotland, and I was formally detained for 6 months, subject to renewal, as laid out in Section 30 of the aforesaid Act. I left the courtroom with a nurse on either side of me. As we stood outside in the drizzle waiting for a taxi, I watched the treacly water of the Clyde flowing past and wondered how cold it would be. Out of the window of my room, a window that was reinforced glass and that wouldn't open more than a couple of centimetres, plugged into my CD player or my radio, listening to the music of British Sea Power and Johnny Cash or John Peel's soothing voice. I watched scurrying commuters take the shortcut across. The old Victorian asylum was shut down now, the windows boarded up and the walls vandalised. I'd been taught there as a medical student. There was talk it was to be converted to luxury flats. I wondered who would buy one. My meetings with Dr. Lorimer bristled with mutual exasperation. It isn't healthy keeping me locked up, I said. I need fresh air. We can't risk it at this stage, I'm afraid. He tried every kind of antidepressant and more on me. You do know, I said, that just because I want to kill myself, it doesn't make me a fucking nutter. That kind of language isn't helpful, Helen. I wrote pages and pages of unreadable torment in a hardback journal that a friend had given me years earlier to chart my pregnancy and the birth of the child that didn't come. And I read Eliot, Thackeray, Tolstoy, different worlds, different times. Christmas arrived and I was still confined to the ward under constant observation. Dr. Lorimer decided he would allow me out for 4 hours on Christmas Day. Mark came to collect me. I changed out of my ripped jeans and faded sweatshirt into a red dress that hung like a sack on me. At home, I watched the clock and cried into my M&S turkey breast with cranberry sauce. When the time was up, Mark took me back to the ward. For light relief, Lorraine, my next name nurse, told me stories of the more unusual ways that patients had tried to kill themselves. A man had tried to poison himself by eating roses. He'd sustained thorn-related injuries, but nothing life-threatening. One woman, she said, had tried to cut her wrist with a quaver. We came to the conclusion, as did the women, that corn snacks were not the most effective way of ending one's life. Lorraine was Dr. Lorimer's eyes and ears on the ward. She was plump, with cropped brown hair and a round face. Her short-sleeved tunic showed off her chubby arms, and her polyester trousers had an elasticated waist to allow for her ample belly. In size and shape, and in the way she cared for me, she represented everything I felt a mother figure should. Though she spent most of her working day sat outside my room reading gossip magazines, almost nothing escaped her. She spotted the wounds in my marriage and tried to bandage them. Mark had no choice but to bring me back on Christmas Day, she said. You know that, right? I didn't have the words to answer, and he had no alternative but to agree to your section. At 40, Lorraine was only 4 years older than me, but she had married as a teenager and was the mother of 2 grown-up girls. She'd always lived in Glasgow, but somehow she seemed more worldly than me. When she'd read all she could about Gwyneth Paltrow's wedding or Britney Spears' bikini body, she'd come into my room and bitch about the other patients and staff, sometimes even managing to prize a half-hearted laugh from me. She started on Phyllis. She was lucky she wasn't sacked, you know, this time last year. Phyllis was our activity nurse. Together with Gentle John, she was an avid disciple of the Atkins diet. On the days when John was guarding my door, Phyllis would stop by to compare their daily egg and bacon input. You can eat as much as you like, you know, she told me, as if I was interested, so long as it's protein. She boasted that she'd lost several stones in weight, but from what I could tell, it had come entirely off her top half. She had the biggest backside I'd ever seen. The step of her hip seems expressly designed for infants to perch on. During the week, she ran relaxation classes that none of the patients attended. She'd waddle around the ward in her yoga outfit, trying to persuade us to participate, to bring our pillows and go into the sitting room where the lights were dimmed and the TV turned off for once, to listen to whale song and panpipes. I always refused. It wasn't the escape I was looking for. She decided to decorate the ward for Christmas, Lorraine said. God knows what she was thinking. Ferguson House had a grand name, but it was little more than a porter cabin with high security doors and windows, bad plumbing and peeling paintwork. It could have done with being spruced up. Oh, right, I said. She put up streamers and tinsel, she said, and then decided to light candles in the corridor. Lorraine paused. Candles in this place? Can you believe it? With all these arsonists and nutters? That day, I recognised Phyllis as someone who didn't know the rules either. When Lorraine wasn't around, I had Jackie as my name nurse. One day when I was feeling particularly low, she praised Mark. You've got a good man there, Helen, she said. I know, I said. Yes, she added. Any other man would have left you. One afternoon, there was a commotion. Get your filthy pig's hands off me, you fucker. It was Sadie, being frog marched back to the ward by a couple of policemen, her tiny frame dwarfed by the two men. As she swore, she spat out strands of her platinum hair that had strayed into her mouth. Her denim jacket was plastered in mud. Her t-shirt ripped at the shoulder, exposing her black lacy bra, and her tights laddered. A round of applause broke out among the patients. Sadie had absconded from the hospital for a night and had apparently got shit-faced on cheap vodka and smack she'd bought with money she'd earned turning tricks on the ward. She took a bow. She was a returning heroine. She was my heroine. For several months, I tried to follow Sadie's example and make my escape, attempting to squeeze through the open door as a dinner trolley came in, or following the cleaners as they slipped out the side door. I was watched all the time. I never made it. I'm considering IPCU, Dr. Lorimer said eventually. IPCU was the Intensive Psychiatric Care Unit. I'd heard about it. It was a place for the irredeemably mad and the criminally insane. Please, no, I said, fear gripping the back of my neck. Last chance. Let's up the diazepam to 10 mg 3 times a day. If nothing else, it meant that I could hold my own with the patient's conversation in the TV room on the few occasions that I ventured back there. 10 milligrams doesn't it touch me these days, somebody would say. Me neither, I'd say, and they would look at me in astonishment. You speak. By 6 months, my hair had grown thin and straggly below my shoulders. Ailsa, an alcoholic and for rehab, was a hairdresser and set herself up in business on the ward, cutting, blow-drying, curling and straightening for the customers who sat on the chair beside her bed. The ward tasted of styling mousse and hair lacquer. She shaped my hair into an orderly bob at odds with my appearance. I admired her steady hands. Mine shook constantly. I could barely write or hold a coffee cup. My writing had changed from a flowing italic to a scrawl that looked at it as if it had been written by a spider on caffeine. My weight dropped to 6.5 stone. Dr. Lorimer confronted me with the alternatives. We can either carry on as we are, which doesn't seem to be helping, or we can think about ECT. Fuck off, there's nothing fucking wrong with me, I said. I had 6 lots of ECT and lost my short-term memory. There was a delicious feeling of losing consciousness as I fought the anaesthetic. Each time, I tried to keep my eyes open and fixed on the operating light, which blurred in and out of focus above me. And each time, I gave in to the drugs and slipped into another world. And when I awoke, I barely knew my own name. It was the first real escape that I had managed. I saw Davy, the lad who had attacked me, before he left the ward. His eyes no longer flashed with visions he couldn't control. Instead, they were glassy and cooperative. He shook my hand. I hope he gets home soon, doll, he said. I think having a medical background was both an advantage and a disadvantage. It was definitely an advantage. I felt like I got some preferential treatment on the ward, and it really upset me at the time. I got a single room, which I was very glad for, but I felt really fraudulent being there. I didn't think that there was, well, no, I learnt the true meaning of ambivalence. I thought ambivalence meant that you had neither one view or another, and I realised the true meaning of ambivalence is that you hold two contrasting ideas exactly the same time. So I both believed that I was completely fraudulent and realised at the same time that I was extremely unwell. And the fraudulent side was overpowering, and I definitely felt that I got preferential treatment being a doctor. I also think that I was able in some ways to, up until I had been admitted, to say the things that I knew I would get away with. I could manipulate in both, not manipulate is too strong a word, but I could use it in both ways. When I was really ill but not sure where I was going, I would not signal the really strong signs and symptoms that I had and thought processes that I had. But at the same time, eventually, I did admit it and ask for help, but knowing at the same time that some of the things that I was saying would be the things that would set off loads of alarm bells. So it was, yeah, it was complicated, and I felt like I was, you know, I know there's a sort of cliche, doctor heal yourself kind of thing, but I felt like I understood what was happening, so I should be able to do something about it. Absolutely loved writing it. I loved it. It was struggled at parts to get it right and everything, and there were some really dark bits in it. There's one scene in particular that actually it made me cry, and I was like, oh my. But no, I loved it because I loved all of my characters, even Finn, the main character, who a lot of people object to because he's a prat. Well, I hope it's authentic. I think being a medical student and a doctor in the city helped. I've got family there, my in-laws are there. I think being a patient on ward also helped, but just living in the city for a long time. I mean, I know I don't have the accent, but the dialogue actually is one of the things that I found quite easy to do because I could just hear it. As I say, the original essay I wrote about 10 years ago, and it was a part of my Open University creative writing course, and I have had a fantastic tutor there who was really championed me, and she wanted me to try and get it published at the time. But even though that was a few years after all the events, I don't think I thought I was quite well. I realised looking back that I was still really, really vulnerable, and that it was far too close to me still. And then the reason that I acted on it was that I saw a Channel 4 news report, and it was talking to people who had been sectioned under the Mental Health Act, and listening to their stories, I just thought, golly, there's lots of stories to be shared here, and I just thought it was really important. So I sent the essay and got it published, and had loads of really, really amazing feedback, and lots of people saying to me that they would really love to hear the rest of the story and find out what happened. And so that's what I did. I took the essay as a starting point for my sorry, I'm just moving my Zoom chat out of the way. I took the essay as a starting point for the memoir and worked around it, basically. The editor of the magazine, Arifa Akbar, was was just brilliant with me with that essay, because I was nervous about publishing it, and her feedback and her comments on it like really gave me a lot of motivation to carry on and tell the story. So I'm really glad that I did it. I was so nervous about doing it. I was so nervous about exposing myself, and you know, and I think one of the problems I think that I will encounter is that it's very difficult. We were talking earlier on in a session about rejection and critique and all of these sort of things. It's very difficult to take critique of your work. I try and always take it on. Well, I'm talking about once it's published. You know, like the critique as you go along is the helpful critique that makes you polish your work. But once it's published, if somebody doesn't like it, then it's your baby. It's really hard to distance yourself. But although to begin with, whenever I read a review that didn't get it, I was like, I want to throttle them. I knew I was quite good at distancing myself from those words and saying it's not me, it's the book. One of the things that is terrifying about writing a memoir is that it will be much harder to do that. So I definitely couldn't have done it before now. I am the wellest I've been for so long, and to have the strength to do it, and I really want to do it now. I really want to share stuff. I think everybody's stories are important. I think these stories are important. It did, and I had the most amazing experience actually here with a friend who I don't know her brilliantly well, but she stopped me in the car park and she basically in tears thanked me for writing it because she had had some family experience. But I said to her, but it's not really a redemptive story. I mean, I went on to be extremely unwell, even beyond what I've just spoken about. And she said that just hearing that other people had gone through a similar thing was helpful, even if it doesn't provide any answers. And so I thought that was an amazing thing for somebody to say to me, and it really helped. And also the thing about lots of writer friends, I've decided that everybody who writes is absolutely cursed. I don't know whether like people are writing because they're mad or they become mad while they're writing or what. I've got a terrible name for it at the moment. The titles are the things that I absolutely, it takes me so long. It took me forever to get Backstreets of Purgatory, but once I got it, I realised it was the right title. So it's you know, it's got a working title of brain soup, but it's not. That's not going to be. That's not going to be the final one. ECT took out huge chunks. Like there were some things when I didn't know whether I'd seen a certain film, I'd been to a certain place, I knew somebody. And I think also the illness, the stress of the illness affected my memory in different ways. But I did keep a journal while I was in hospital, and so that provided the basis of some of it. And looking back at it, it's like, oh my goodness, I'd forgotten that and stuff. And I've also realised that any memoir is just somebody's version of the truth, and nobody's version of the truth is exactly the same. And people who were there at the same time as me during this experience will have different memories and different experiences of the whole time. So all I thought that I could do is stick as closely to the facts as I could. I don't go completely into wild imaginings, but I'm sure that there are timelines and things that are not right, and facts and conversations misremembered and all that sort of stuff. But the most important thing for me was to keep the emotional truth of what happened, and I think that's all you can do, really. I do look, when I don't often open that journal because it's really sad to see it, and I feel really sad for the person who was living it at the time. But writing the memoir hasn't been quite as hard as I thought. It is really emotionally draining and tiring. When I write a section and remembering it as much as I can, it's draining. It's really physically draining in a way I didn't expect. But I don't go, although I'm there and like witnessing it, I'm not back there emotionally in the way that I have been in the past, because with some post-traumatic stress disorder type things. So yeah, it was quite surprising. I wouldn't have been able to do it if I had been there feeling the same way, or even getting like a lot of memories of the way that I was feeling. I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I think when I wrote the Backstreets, it wasn't intended to be in any way autobiographical. I wanted to get as far away from that as possible. But I think what it did do was show what some of my preoccupations are. And the things that my characters experience are not things that I've necessarily experienced. But I do think that it's been helpful in my experience, especially being on the ward and meeting other people, has probably given me some insight that I wouldn't necessarily have had otherwise. I do completely. I was always me. Somebody asked me like whether I felt like myself. I was always me inside. I was just completely and utterly lost, but I was always me. So because of that, it is the same. It is the same person. I've changed, definitely. Learned a lot of things, but fundamentally who I am, it was always there. And actually, I think, yeah, no, I'll just stop there. So people are writing really nice comments. So thank you very much. And thank you everybody for coming to listen.